It's very nice to be back in Delhi, which was my childhood home. And coming from the airport, I remember riding my bike up that road. And it was just a wonderful experience. And what I'd like to talk to you about this evening is the key, the one thing that will change everything for animals. Because I imagine that everybody here cares about animals or you wouldn't come, and you care about what's happening to them. So when we look at how far we've progressed, we know that even though we have a long way to go, we can indeed make that progress if we try. And that key is in our hands. So what I would like to do is have you imagine a little something with me. Imagine that you and I go on holiday together. We choose some lovely location. I was going to say, because it sounded exciting, Egypt, but I think that's too exciting right now. But we go to a foreign place. We check in our hotel. It's evening, it's getting dark, and we decide to go out and have a meal. So you and I go out onto the street, and we're walking towards the restaurant, and suddenly there's the screech of tires, and a truck pulls up right next to us, and some men come up from behind us and grab us and throw us in the truck. And we're petrified. We don't know what this is or what's happening. What can it be? And the door slams behind us, and we're in the dark. And we hear a lot of people breathing around us. We hear children crying. And someone says, "They're taking us to be killed." And we know it's right. That's what's happening. So the truck moves on down the road, and it comes to a halt suddenly. I'm leaning against the back door, and the door just opens a little bit, and I fall onto the pavement. The door closes, and the truck takes off again. And I stand up, and I look around, and I think, has the driver seen me? And no, nobody's seen me. So I pick myself up, brush my clothes off, hide for a minute, and then somehow I make my way back to the hotel where we're staying. And you're still on the truck with all those others. So I go to my room, I get inside, my heart is pounding, I close the door, and what do I do now? What do I do? Do I turn on the television, take a bath, read a magazine, call a friend and chat about things? Or do I get help for you, because you're still on the truck with all those others? And the reason that this is a fair question is because there are individuals on the truck right now. They're going down the highway, they're going down the road, and they're going to their deaths. And it's so easy for us to forget that that's happening. We can't remember it every moment of the day, or we would go insane. But we have to remember it enough in our busy lives that we don't abandon them, and that we do get help for them, and that we do as much as we possibly can. There are animals at this moment, and I remember because I had followed them about 10 years ago, it's still going on, crossing from Tamil Nadu into Kerala, into Karnataka, who are going to have their throats slit. And you saw a little snippet of the video of what they go through. Their leather is worth more than their flesh. So it's just something to remember, because they're all scared to death and not one of them wishes to be killed. So our question is, do I forget them, or do I remember them as much as possible and do what I can to stop them? Because human beings are very funny creatures. We separate ourselves out. Just because one of us invented Cheetos or something, we think we're special. But we're not. We're exactly the same as all the other animals in the only ways that count. The others don't sit around and fret about what top goes with what slacks, or which Bollywood actor is the handsomest. They just live their lives. They get on with things. And on the truck, though, we're the same. We're the same in the ways that count. I think that most people here tonight, if I guessed, probably care enough about animals that you don't eat them, you don't support animal abusing industries, you probably buy cosmetics and floor cleaner that are not tested on animals, and I doubt very much that you would buy tickets to go and see elephants who are chained in the circus. And that is all wonderful. It means that we relate to what the American President Lincoln said, which is, if we ourselves would not wish to be slaves, then we surely don't wish to be masters. But understanding that isn't enough. Changing ourselves is not enough. Living an ethical life ourselves is not sufficient. The key is that we change ourselves, we do as much as we possibly can, and then we go on and we change other people, because other people just don't know. We need to act on our beliefs, because all the movements before us acted, and they all achieved change. So two weeks after the inauguration, I was listening to the radio, and there was a story about a woman named Susan Enron, and she grew up in a very racist household. Her father would tell really nasty jokes at the dinner table about women, about people who weren't white, you name it. And Susan had never said anything until one day she had watched a film with Gregory Peck from the 1940s called Gentleman's Agreement. And in this film, the woman, the star of the show, of the film, is in love with Gregory Peck's character. And she goes to see her friend, and she says, I'm really worried because the Gregory Peck character is breaking up with me because he thinks I'm anti-Semitic, and I'm not. And her friend says to her, well, why does he think you're anti-Semitic? She said, well, there was a dinner, and we were at this dinner, and a man was telling these awful, awful jokes about Jewish people. And I didn't join in. And her friend said, yes, but what did you do? And she said, I was angry. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to walk out. And her friend said, but what did you do? And she said, I just sat there, put my head down. I didn't do anything. And that's when it clicked for her, and she had this epiphany. And the next time she was home for dinner, and her father tried to tell these racist jokes and these jokes against women, Susan said, Daddy, I don't think those jokes are funny. And he said, what do you mean? And she was afraid. But she said, I work, and I know with a lot of people who are not white, a lot of people who are women, and they are among the most wonderful people that I know. And her father just kept quiet. And afterwards, her brothers came up and said, thank you for saying that. We've always wanted to say something, but we never had the nerve. And from that moment on, there were never any of those jokes in that house. So today, because one and another person who is gay has spoken up, in the US, politicians would not dare to say anything against somebody because they're gay. And I hear that movement is beginning and starting to flourish. And that's because there would be repercussions. They might cost their job if they said such a thing that 20 years ago, even, they could get away with saying. They can't today. And so there have to be repercussions if people denigrate animals, or people say, animal rights activists, oh, that's nothing, we don't care. We have to make repercussions. And already it's happening. I have to tell you that if people hear that PETA is involved in something, they get very nervous. If they're doing something bad, they get very nervous. And I have a case in point. The United States Coast Guard was doing experiments on animals, and somebody, bless their heart, a whistleblower, called us and said, this is going on. So we contacted the United States Coast Guard, someone, and said, we're investigating this, and they said, oh, we'll look into it. We then got an email back a day later and it was from a top official of the US Coast Guard. But he had forgotten to delete the string. Do we all know how that is? Yes, we do. And so the top said to us, thank you for this. We're looking into it immediately. And then 6 of the other top officials in the United States Coast Guard had been copied, and he had said to them, help, help, PETA's after me, help. So animals try to stick up for themselves against enormous odds. And they don't always succeed. I mean, what have they got going for them as compared to what we've got going for us? There is a plaque in Malaysia, in this little town, alongside a railway track, where a bull elephant died. And the reason he died was one day he was crossing the track, and this happens here, we hear about it all the time, with his family. He had 2 little babies, and the youngest baby, the tiniest baby, was the slowest. And as the train was coming down the track, that baby was too slow. But the driver saw that baby and didn't stop. And the bull elephant witnessed this, and the next day, you know what they say, elephants don't forget. No animals forget. The bull elephant went back. At the same time, the same train came down the track, and he waited. And when that driver started to come towards him, he stepped onto the track, he raised his trunk, and he bellowed at that train to stop. And the driver didn't. And he hit the bull, and the bull derailed the train and died. But nobody from that moment forward will ever be employed by that railway again if they hit another elephant. And there are signs there that tell the drivers that on penalty of your job, you must slow down. That elephant did the job. That elephant got the job done, but he had to lose his life to do it. And we can get the job done, but we never, ever have to sacrifice our lives to do that. We have to be honest. I think that's the key thing. And all we have to do is say what's in our hearts. So this even means if somebody we know is ordering the chicken curry, why don't we just say to them, I wish you wouldn't do that. I really do. Please, will you understand that all animals are wonderful individuals? Just the way Susan Enron said that to her father. It took courage, but really it doesn't take that much when somebody says something derisory or does something bad to animals to just speak up. It's not that much to ask. To say all animals feel pain and love and joy and loneliness just as we do, and they don't deserve to be treated in a bad way. It's that simple. And we can get help that way for the animals on the truck simply by asking people, do nothing. Do nothing for animals. Don't buy food that's made from animals. Don't go to the animal circus. Don't buy clothing that's made from animals. Don't go to a purebred dog breeder. Rescue a dog. Don't wear animal skins or wool. Don't even sit through a film that has scenes in it in which some singer is riding on the top and jumping up and down with dancers on the back of a bullock cart, or somebody is riding their hot rod through a flock of pigeons or chickens. Don't just sit there. We stand up and we walk out. I do it all the time. And I go and see the manager, and I tell him why I'm walking out, and I tell him who animals are and how wonderful they are, that they don't deserve this kind of treatment. And I usually not only get free tickets, but I get free popcorn. So some people say, well, I don't like to impose my choices on others. But I would say this: since when is it a legitimate choice to be cruel to the elderly, to children, to animals, or to anybody? It isn't. We shouldn't feel silly about saying something to people. Maybe one thing that helps, because it helps me, is when you're about to have to say something to someone, nicely, politely, but say something that makes them think, is to conjure up the image of one particular animal that you may know or have seen something happen to. And for me, it's a little crab. There was a restaurant, I went into the back, there was a vat of boiling fat, and there was a crab, a series of crabs, covered in batter and ready to put in the pot. And that one little crab I saw, even though he couldn't see where he was going, was trying with all his might to get out and find the door, to get away from that place. So if I have to say anything to anybody, I speak up for that one crab. I remember him, and remember he had no power. He had no voice. He only has us. And it's not courageous to speak up, really. What's courageous in the United States is to go out in the woods in hunting season. And you don't even have to, you can be related to the hunter. They still shoot you. It goes on all the time. Although recently, I don't know if you've read, probably doesn't come over here, there have been a number of incidents where dogs have been shooting hunters. They'll put them in the back of the truck, and they'll put the weapon in the back of the truck, and by mistake, the dog steps on the trigger, and that's the end of that. I don't think they know what they're doing. But we won't be slammed into prison for speaking up, because all citizens have the right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. The worst thing that will happen is that someone will say something back to you, and it's usually not something very bright. So you don't have to answer that even. You can just let it sit out there. My friend says, just because someone rings the doorbell doesn't mean you have to answer the door. So you don't have to argue with everybody. You can just make your point known. You can answer, or you can simply smile. We had a circus demonstration against the circus. And a young lady handed a pamphlet to a man. And the man wheeled around and he said to her, "Why don't you get a job?" She was 12. So everybody just stared at him, and that's how it should be. So our most cherished right is our freedom of expression, our freedom of speech, and we don't want to waste it. A few words, even really polite words, can change somebody forever. And I am deeply grateful to every single person who told me things. I bought a wildcat hat in Kashmir that I loved and used to wear on my head. If only somebody had said when I was about to buy that hat, "Do you know how they trap these cats? Do you know what happens?" My father and I were eating our way through the animal kingdom. I loved nothing more than a meat pie, and no one ever said anything to me. I knew vegetarians. They very quietly ate their vegetarian food, and nobody said anything. Human beings are not that bright. We need a little prod. We need somebody to say something to us so that we know, oh, how does that affect me? And I am really ashamed to say that my cat would probably still be having kittens today if someone hadn't shown me the problem of animal homelessness and what it means. A few words, that's all it really matters. So you talk to somebody and they say, well, I'm really trying to be vegan, or I'm really trying to be vegetarian. And I would say, what does that mean? You know, if somebody's really trying to be pregnant, that's not up to them. You can try, but if you order the lamb kebab, that's 100% up to you. There isn't somebody standing on your chest and forcing that into your mouth. You make that choice voluntarily. And I think what they want us to do is say, oh, it's okay. I know it's difficult. It's not difficult. I know it takes a while. Oh, please, take your time. They want our buy-in. And I would say, like the Nike slogan, we should say to them, just do it. I'll help you, but just do it. Or we could sick this man on them. Do you know who this is? Anybody know who this is? This is Patrick Bubanian. He's the strongest man in Germany. He can lift 550 kilograms and carry it for 10 meters. Nobody has broken that record. And you know what? He's a vegan. You know, the longest distance runner is also a vegan. So being timid doesn't get us anywhere. And you don't have to be like him to say something. Years ago, somebody told me when he was in college that he opposed the Vietnam War, and all his friends would stand outside the college and protest, but he never went to join them because he always thought he would look foolish. And he used to say, somebody I want to impress might be driving by, and they would see me standing there with this sign, and they would think less of me. So about 20 years later, he was driving by and he saw a PETA demonstration, and there were only 5 people standing outside a fur store. And as he went by, he thought, that looks pretty pathetic. But then he thought, well, you know, I've never done this, and I believe in this. And 6 people would look a little less pathetic. So he stopped his car and he went back and he joined the fur protest, and he felt good about himself for doing it. But he also there met the woman who he's been with for now 20 years and he tries to impress every day. So that worked out. So activism takes many forms, and like that game that my parents used to give us in the car where you're driving along and they try to keep you quiet. It's called I Spy with My Little Eye. Do you know that one? And you have to pick out D is for dog, T is for tree. We should tick all those boxes of all the things that we can do for animals, all the various kinds of activism, and not be satisfied until we've done them all over and over again. Let's show everybody pictures. Let's show everybody videos. Let's ask people, can you deny the love on the faces of these animals, of these mothers and their children? No, aw, aw, aw. Aw. And this, look, she's showing her baby to everybody. I hope you can see that. So we tell everybody who will listen that a mother's love isn't necessarily limited to human beings. And I don't mean voluntarily listen. You've always got the lift and the bus stop and the who knows where you can speak to people. Tell people that certain mammals use verbs. This is now being shown. That fish tell time. And if someone says to you, fish can't tell time, you could show them the whole scientific study. Or you can say, well, have you ever known anybody who had a fish and they feed them at a certain time? And you know the fish stops what they're doing around about that time and goes over and waits? So they do. That insects construct boats. And that while others come in slightly different packages than we do, it's what's inside that counts. That's all. This is a whale's eye. This is an elephant's eye. Look at this. This is Siri, an elephant. Aren't they the same? There's a person in there as surely as there's a person inside that human eye. And I know this because years ago I pulled alongside a river in the evening. I'd been out somewhere to a conference. I was very tired. And I just felt that I needed to just stop. And I pulled into the parking lot by the Schuylkill River. And I looked across out to the water. And of course, animal rights activists never get to rest. There was a man fishing. So I watched, and he pulled out of the water what seemed to be the longest fish in the world. But one of those sets, 9 hooks in all, had been caught down the eel's throat. And the man was trying to struggle with the eel and trying to get the hook out, and he couldn't. So I held the eel, and he got the pliers, and I wanted this to hurry up for the eel's sake. So the man put the pliers down his throat, and suddenly he lost his temper. And before I could say or do anything, he pulled, and he pulled all the hooks and the entire lining out of this eel's throat. And at that very minute, I was holding the eel at eye level. I was looking into the eel's eye. The eye of that eel was looking at me. And registered in that eye was what? All the shock, all the pain, all the horror, all the fear, all the I cannot believe it that would happen if that was happening to us or to a dog or to any living being. It was the same. There was a person in that package. So the man and I talked. We sat on the embankment. We had some words. I talked to him about who fish are. And I have no idea if to this day he goes back and he spends his amusement time fishing. I don't know. All I know is that if I hadn't spoken to him, he certainly would still be doing that. But because I spoke to him, there is a chance that he gave up fishing or doesn't fish so often. So the moral, of course, is that sometimes we fail to reach people. But if we always try, we always reach people. The poet W.H. Auden was born in 1907, and he wrote a poem that illustrates how even the most well-educated human beings are ignorant of animals' ability and sentience. He wrote this: "As I listened from a beach chair in the shade to all the noises that my garden made, it seemed to me only proper that words should be withheld from vegetables and birds. Not one of them was capable of lying, and there was not one which knew it was dying." So in those days, nobody realized that animals are so like us that they do tell lies. It's not all good. Baby chimpanzees try to blame a sibling if they do something wrong. And male chimpanzees try to have sex craftily behind their mate's back when they're not looking, something they probably learned from American politicians. In Auden's time, nobody knew that bottlenose dolphins actually whistle the individual name of their loved one when they're in distress, and that a parrot gives a unique name to her baby that no other baby shares, and that baby will answer to for his whole life. That crows have different regional dialects. Crows in Delhi have no idea what crows in Mumbai are saying. That animals mourn. This is a dog who was adopted from the street by an Italian lady, and she used to take him to church every day on Sunday. I'm not sure if it did him any good or her any good, but they did that. And when she died, that dog still continues to go at the same time on Sunday and sit right by her pew. No one can say animals don't mourn. And we all know this is an African elephant cradling bones he found and making sounds of distress about them. 37 different sounds were recorded from that elephant. And he didn't even know who that was. He was so distressed to find that whoever it was had died. There are other things too, about animals having a sense of humor. You know that when you go home, your dog makes a little bow and starts to play. And we've seen that, but all animals play, and they have an enormous sense of fun. In St. Petersburg, the crows there catch these wind drafts, and they go up over the St. Petersburg Cathedral, and then they slide down the stained glass on their bottoms. And they've done it so much that they've actually worn off some of the stained glass. And the complaint that the little deer, the little sika deer have on an island in Japan, is that the crows, just to pass time, pick up the deer dung, these tiny little droppings, And if a deer should turn her head, the crow just pops that dung in her ear, and then she can't get it out at all. No hope. I was writing a book about dogs and what we can do to relate to them and give them a more full life. It was called Let's Have a Dog Party. And I found this story about years ago. In Manhattan, there was a rabies scare. And a crowd had gathered around this little dog who was foaming at the mouth. And they had called the police. So then this woman, beautifully dressed, came pushing her way through the crowd, and she said, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry, he slipped his collar." She said, "We were sitting at a cafe down the road, and we were having some tea, and a pastry cart came by." And he said, "That's a cream puff he's got in his mouth, and he's trying, that you won't see it, and the cream is coming out of the sides." Look at this seagull being clever. This is in England. See how he looks around carefully, moves slowly, and then, whoa, hurry up. Knows exactly where they are. Can we see, we'll see that again, we'll run it again. Notice how he changes and he looks at the clerk who's over there, storekeeper, and then let's get them. They're really just so wonderful. So when people say, oh, and he shares this, I think. I don't know if it's on his notes or not, but he shares it. People say you're attributing human characteristics to animals. You've heard that. And I would say no. Being in love, being afraid, feeling all sorts of emotions are shared characteristics. They're not human characteristics. They're shared. And I'm sure that there's a troop of baboons sitting somewhere, and one baboon is saying, you know, these are baboon characteristics, but they're not, they're shared. So we need to do all we can to help humans understand the other animals. 200 years ago, the French Academy defined a crab as a small red fish which moves backwards. And the naturalist Cavalier said to them, that would be perfect except for 3 things. The crab is not a fish, it's not red, and he doesn't walk backwards. So I asked myself, how far have we come since those days? How enlightened have we become in 200 years? This year, scientists who swore blind that the gardener's frog couldn't hear found that that frog has a membrane that allows him to hear that's in his mouth. This year we learned that penguins mourn their dead. We had no idea. We learned that sudden aggression in dogs, they shouldn't be punished for that or yelled at. It may mean that they have pain for which they have no relief and they cannot communicate it to us in our language. We learned this year that chickens count at least up to 5. We learned that bears can count. And when I was a little girl living here, they used to bring the bears around with the ropes through their noses and bang the drum and make them dance and tap the stick and make them dance. I wonder if those bears were counting how many years or how many days it would be before they had their freedom. Albert Einstein wrote this. He wrote, a human being is part of the whole, part of the universe, yet he experiences himself, his thoughts and his feelings as something somehow separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a prison that restricts us to our personal desires and to affection just for a few people nearest to us. Our task has to be to free ourselves from this prison by widening the circle of our compassion to embrace all living creatures. So we have to remind people, when they look down their noses at the other animals, of which we are just one, and they call them dirty, that they didn't leave rubbish on the street, that they didn't leave plastic bags in their wake, and that it was most human beings who used to defecate on the street, and many of them still do. You know, some bright spark invented plumbing, but we're not that far removed from all the things that we find that we can criticize animals for. Just 80 years ago, tribal peoples considered human brains a delicacy. In Borneo and places like that, big ships would pull up, the sailors would go ashore, and they'd get eaten. You know, cannibalism wasn't a rarity then. In many of the islands around the South Pacific, it was a way of life. And in fact, one sea captain had in his log that after he sent an exploratory group of sailors ashore, that tribal chief came out in his canoe to the boat to complain. He said, these European sailors they taste bad. He said, they're marinated in whiskey and tobacco. Can you do something about it? He was a naturalist of his time. There was also at that time a man, a priest, who went to Tierra del Fuego and wanted to record the language of the Tierra del Fuego Indians. And he said to the captain of that ship, when you go up here, you turn around, you come back, I'll be ready to get back on board. Because they only have a few words, a few grunts that they make. They really don't communicate. And he was there for 27 years, and he never completed the dictionary because he learned that they do indeed communicate. The way we're learning that animals all communicate perfectly wonderfully with themselves. Ravens don't only make noises, they communicate with their beaks and with their wing gestures. Cows, we have discovered very recently, have almost imperceptible facial movements that we don't notice. And a cow may come and stare at you, and you're just not getting the message that if she stared at another cow, that cow would get. Elephants express joy by rumbling, and those rumbles, as you know, carry so far. They can also express danger to other herds who are 2 miles away, a long, long distance. If somebody is hurting elephants here, they can communicate it to elephants there. Rhinos have a breathing language. And some animals use a clicking sound language, the way African tribes use a clicking sound language, or they drum with their feet to communicate with each other. And some whistle or use high-speed sounds. And when we've used underwater microphones, we find that fish make sounds like cheeping and twittering of birds. And last month we learned something spectacular about animal communication. We learned that 2 kinds of fish communicate with each other by pointing. A grouper, which is a very large fish, who doesn't have hands, doesn't have fingers, will point to a wrasse, who is a very sleek little fish. And what he does is this: the grouper cannot get into a hole to take out the prey or the food that he wants to take out. So he'll go over to a wrasse and he'll shimmy like this. And that means basically, follow me. It's like Lassie is down the hole, follow me. Or little Timmy is down the hole. And the wrasse will follow the grouper to the place where the grouper wants to eat whatever's inside. And the grouper will turn on her head and point with her nose, her face, down into the hole. And that's when the wrasse goes in and flushes out what the grouper wants to eat. Absolutely astonishing things that we have no idea about as we are busy using animals for every stupid purpose. Chickens can be taught self-control. If you, at University of Bristol, their chickens, they put down 1 piece of melon, and the chicken knows, if you resist eating that piece of melon, then you'll get a second piece. You try that with any human child. You know where that will go. And now we have, coming up, the interspecies internet. Peter Gabriel, the wonderful animal rights musician who's been inducted into the Hall of Fame, he has got together with Vint Cerf from Google and somebody from MIT, Neil Gershenfeld, and they have put together an interspecies internet. And what this means, you can see it on TED Talks, is they gave a keyboard to a bonobo ape. And within a matter of moments, she was composing a melody that made sense. And what Peter Gabriel says is all over the world, I talk to people through music who I don't speak their language, they don't speak mine, but we communicate perfectly wonderfully through the power of music. And now he's introducing, this trio is introducing it to animals. And you don't even have to make a sound. You see a fish flopping on the bank, they don't have to make a noise. You can see if your eyes are open that they're communicating, that they're suffering, they're struggling. They want to go back in their environment. So we cannot let anybody ever say, get away with saying, that animals are inferior, because they are gobsmackingly impressive. They find their way with their noses, which are up to 1,000 times more sensitive than ours, by the stars, by the Earth's magnetic field, even by low-frequency radio waves, without any instruments at all. You know, it was a bird who first circumnavigated the globe, not a human sailor. And they think, look at this bird figuring things out. She doesn't get it right the first time, but she knows she has to keep going. No, not good enough. Bingo. And see this dog having fun. His owner is away, and he's decided, look at this, yes. And he can do that over and over again as long as his people are out. Here he goes. The joy of this, yes. And this horse I'm going to show you here. This is very clever. This horse had to study this. With just lips and teeth, head on the other side, managed to open the gate. And doesn't just let himself out. He thinks, I've got friends next door, haven't I? Not them, but them. Yeah. Works on it hard with his teeth now from the other side, so he's able to open that. I mean, this takes concentration. And then there are other things going on down here that we might want to do. I mean, let's do the whole thing here. This is a double door. This is going to take some work. We're so used to giving animals commands and not letting them live their own lives. Here he goes. All right. Now I'm going to show you one more. That's his friend in there. This is really tricky. You have to pull up first this slat, and then at the same time you have to position so that you can push this door, which is quite heavy, sideways while you've got this up. Look at that. And he can do it. Yes, you're out. And there's this rat who cares so much about her baby that she's risking her life to get him to safety. And here's a chicken who, University of Bristol again, they try to prove that animals are clever and they have feelings so people will stop using them. She doesn't want to go through this obstacle course. She doesn't want to walk on thin wire, but she knows that if she does, she can get away into this box and safely have her babies. And I think you may have heard that apes can now beat college students at computer games. Have you heard that? It's true. Numbers come on a screen and then they disappear very quickly. And college students and apes have to figure out which sequence these numbers came in. And apes do it better than college students. So there's a man in England called Ben Pridmore. He owns the title for being able to memorize an entire pack of cards in 30 seconds. Fastest man on earth. Any order, anything, Ben can do it. So Ben heard about the smart chimpanzee playing computer games in Japan called a Yuma. And he challenged a Yuma to a contest. And you know who won? A Yuma, who is 7 years old. So this is a Yuma, that was Ben. and they're both banned from Las Vegas. But animals aren't that clever. There are things they can't do. For example, they can't drive a car. Oh, wait. Maybe they can. This, honestly, is in New Zealand, where an animal shelter has decided that people would be more likely to adopt dogs if they taught them to drive a car. So here's my poem. Coat of fur, hat of feathers, lobsters boiled alive, shoes and bags and sundry leathers of animals who've died, hunted, trapped, and torn apart for me to satisfy. But who am I, and what my rank, that I may live and they must die? And that is the big question. Why? I'm going to show you some video and some pictures of what is happening to animals right now. And if you find it hard to take, please don't leave. Imagine how hard it is for them to go through it. Imagine how hard it is for the investigators at PETA to have to stand there and film it so we can try to make it stop. I ask, if you can't look, you look down and just listen, because we have to know what's happening in order to talk to other people. This is a picture of a cat being experimented on. We are currently trying to stop these experiments. We've had them suspended. This is a picture of a monkey, terrified, being used in the Covance lab, who tried to stop us, went to court, brought 2 cases in 2 countries to stop us from showing this. But we can show it, and 2 of their labs are now closed, but more are open. These are animals on fur farms. Majority comes from China, being anally and vaginally electrocuted. This is how they are killed. Absolutely no excuse for anybody to wear fur, and what is leather but hairless fur. And elephants taken away from their loving mothers, tied down, and they know their mothers can't help them because that's what they're shown, and their mothers know that they can't help them. And they are beaten with bull hooks, fire is used on them. It can take over a year to train them to behave because they don't understand what they're being asked to do or told to do. Here are lobsters and crabs being dismembered alive, their flesh and their claws pulled from their bodies and their faces ground up in a machine in a factory. And here are wool lambs who have the rump flesh cut off their rear, and they are being sheared. This man is just irritated with a gentle sheep who can do nothing. Here's another clip that shows them shearing. This is all shearing in Australia on farms where the majority kicking him, punching him, jumping on top of him. And what is the sheep doing? The sheep can do nothing. And then in the end, he just picks her up and shucks him down the chute with his boot. These are frightened sheep who are separated from their families, jammed into container ships in the heat on their way to the Middle East to become lamb. And these are calves who are taken away from their loving mothers. Look, what can this mother do except follow? She can't punch him out. She can't, do anything. They watch their calves being taken from them. You can almost see them saying, "Don't take my baby. Where are you going with my baby?" So we can use the milk that was meant for those babies. How much do we really need dairy? This is factory farming, and this is a calf having her horns burned out of her head, which now happens on factory farms because horns are inconvenient. They take space and they get in the way. And her nose is held with a piece of wire to the fence, so when she moves, that's excruciating pain. And this is a frightened pig who is being beaten because someone can, and she's lame, and that's what happens. They just whack them because they can. And this is what happens when we go in any facility where animals are treated as commodities. This is what you see. Live plucking. For what? A jacket, a pillow, a counterpane. Live plucking of geese and ducks who will stay with their mates for life. And what have we got now? Racetrack horses. Finished, their utility gone, not worth anything, going to slaughter. And these snakes nailed to a tree, gutted, beheaded. They don't die outright. It takes them a long time to die. For what? For a bag, for a pair of shoes, for a belt? How important is that? Who are they and who am I that I can live and they must die for my whims? It's not right. And that's why PETA has this campaign that's called Never Be Silent. Never be silent. Because everybody has heard the expression, all it takes for evil to triumph is for a few good people to do nothing, to say nothing, to not get in the way of cruelty. And aside from sociopaths and psychopaths and people who have no mirror neuron, who cannot empathize, they can't put themselves in the place of any other, most people have got compassion inside them. They just don't know what's going on. I think that it's like climbing weeds that go around a tree and that strangle them. Our compassion is strangled by the busyness of our lives, the magazines, the TV shows, the things we want and where we go to eat and everything else. But we can wake them up. I honestly believe that we can change people, because certainly so many people change the way I think about animals, and I'm so grateful. I would ask you, why are these people crying? See, these people are genuinely crying. And the reason they're crying is because somebody cared enough to go into a shopping mall where people were buying shoes or whatever they were doing, and they had a little portable video, or they took their computer maybe with a video, and they showed them Paul McCartney's Glass Walls video. And people were astonished. They had never seen how an animal becomes a meal or a bag, and they just burst into tears. This is the honest reaction of people when we show them what they need to know. We evoke this if we are never silent. And we can inform people. There's no such thing as a responsible dog breeder as long as we have these refuges that are overcrowded with dogs who need homes. There's no such thing, as a humane egg. When you look at the factories that these chickens live in and the misery and the filth of their lives. So we can achieve this heart's desire, which we all share, which is to make animals have less cruelty in their lives, a better lot in life, a better shake. We have to be optimistic, because optimism gets us places. Positivism gets us places. You all know Mark Twain. There's a story Mark Twain had of the very first river gambling boat sitting out on the Mississippi River. And everybody was gathered for it to go off on its maiden voyage. And it was sputtering, and the smoke was coming out of it, and the wheels wouldn't turn. And the man on the bank said to people, "It'll never work, it'll never go, it'll never go." And then suddenly, of course, it sprung to life. The wheels started turning, off it went, and he said, "It'll never stop, it'll never stop." So that must be nothing like the way we think. We have to think, I can make this work. And if you look back, if you've been in animal rights, animal protection any time, you will have seen massive changes that have happened. We want the bull hook, the meat hook, that pipe that's used to jam down the throats of ducks and geese to make foie gras. We want them in a museum, not in use. They only belong in a museum. The thing is, they'll only get in the museum if we're all busy and active. We have to be like Nagadas. Does anybody know Nagadas? 16-year-old boy standing on the railway station platform when Gandhi came through. And Nagadas saw him and said, "Bapu, how should I live my life?" And Gandhi said to him, "Go out and educate people." And that's what he did for the rest of his life. And that's our opportunity. We have social media now. We can educate people on social media. We can write letters to the editor. We can comment on the blogs. We can make one of these videos our auto signature. We can put it on Facebook. We can leave a trail behind us wherever we go. The vegan vegetarian starter kit, these pamphlets, people should know where you are because they can find where you've been from all these things. So I wish you success in everything you do to help them. They certainly need it. Please take our pamphlets, take our videos, take everything that we have and use them. Because as the Hopi Indian tribe used to say, let us hope that we are the people we've been waiting for. Thank you.
Shortly after I started working at PETA India, I went to a slaughterhouse to document the conditions there. One cow was dying, but she fought to live as 5 men surrounded her, beating and dragging her to a terrifying death on the kill floor. As I watched the sheer despair in her eyes, I vowed that I would not forget her. The first campaign that PETA took on involved the almost unimaginable cruelty that animals endure in the leather industry. Bulls and cows, old and young and even babies, are sold and then crammed onto vehicles in such high numbers that their bones break, they suffocate, or they die en route to slaughter. Others are forced on a death march to the slaughterhouse over hot, dusty roads for many kilometers. Hungry, thirsty, and exhausted, many collapse. Drivers rub hot chili peppers and tobacco into their eyes or twist their tailbones, breaking them joint by joint in an effort to force them to get back up. I remember Ingrid cradling the huge head of one old bull in her arms and gently flushing the smear of peppers from his oozing eyes. It was the only kindness he would ever experience. The investigation marked the first time that appalling cruelty of leather was exposed, and although the government has not done its job in stopping that abuse, we have influenced many consumers and designers in India and around the world to go leather-free. PETA's powerful video, Glass Walls, exposes how chickens, pigs, cows, and other animals are killed in slaughterhouses. PETA friend Paul McCartney has said that if the video were shown in every school, the next generation would grow up vegetarian. I have no doubt. Every day, more and more people request a free vegetarian-vegan starter kit. Change is happening, and it's happening right now.
As PETA's science policy advisor, I have watched heartbreaking footage of monkeys kept in solitary confinement in bare and rusty cages. I have seen sick, undying animals left to languish without veterinary care, including rabbits suffering from skin diseases and rats with open wounds. PETA exposed these deplorable conditions at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and after a relentless 3-year campaign, we convinced the institute to retire the aging monkeys and make significant animal welfare improvements. This is just one of our victories. Today, I'm proud to say that testing cosmetics and their ingredients on animals is no longer permitted in India. But perhaps the case that affected me the most involved 70 beagle puppies who were slated to be poisoned in cruel drug tests. Experimenters use beagles because of their friendly nature. The dogs spend their entire lives in barren cages, denied the love of a family, a home, a freedom to run, play, and feel the grass beneath their feet, until they are poisoned to death when the experimenters are done with them. PETA learned that the beagles have been illegally imported from China and fought hard for their release. Member of Parliament Maneka Gandhi and activists from all over the world joined in and worked behind the scenes, and together we made it happen. All the 70 puppies were eventually freed and adopted to loving families. These dogs are just like dogs we share our homes with. All animals are. My job every day is to make sure that others just like them escape cruelty.
Rausha was one of thousands of bullocks who are forced to haul heavy sugarcane carts from the field to the factory. Day after day, he plodded along for miles in stifling heat, feeling the sting of the whip and stumbling on the rutted, dusty roads. But not anymore. Rausha was one of the first 10 bullocks Animal Raj rescued through a groundbreaking tractor project. This first of its kind effort enables poor farmers to to retire their bullocks by replacing them with mini tractors at a subsidized cost. Since the first 10, we have retired many other bullocks, and the Lokmangal Sugar Factory has even pledged to replace all 1800 bullocks who howl its carts within 3 years. When Raushya arrived at Animal Raha's home for retired bullocks, the first thing that we did was carefully cut away the ropes that tugged and rubbed constantly at his sensitive nostrils. I could see the relief in his eyes. He nuzzled me as if to say thank you. After enjoying a sweet treat of jaggery, Raushya and the other rescued bullocks lay down to rest the aching limbs at last. They seemed to know that they would never again have a heavy yoke placed on their necks or feel the pain of being whipped, and that they would never end up at a slaughterhouse. I want every bullock to experience this relief, and Animal Raha's tractor project is working hard to make that happen. One day, sooner than you might think, bullocks will no longer be treated like machines sent to slaughter after a lifetime of overwork. Thanks to PETA, they will finally have the rest, care, food, medical treatment, and affection that they deserve.
After a school workshop that I gave, a little girl told me, "Miss, starting today, I will never hurt any animal, and the first step will be to go vegetarian." This is the power of Compassionate Citizen, PETA's humane education program for children. And it was the moment when I really knew that I was helping to change young hearts and minds forever. Today's children are tomorrow's consumers, decision makers, and parents, so helping them develop empathy for and reject violence against all beings, humans and animals alike, is vital. Compassionate Citizen got a big boost when it was endorsed by the Central Board of Secondary Education, which issued a notification to more than 10,000 CBSE affiliated schools in India to use PETA's program as part of its official school curriculum. Nearly 16,000 private and government schools have used Compassionate Citizen to date, reaching more than 3 million students. If we teach young people to respect and protect animals, they will have respect for all beings. Every time another child signs PETA's pledge to make kind choices during a school workshop, I know that he or she is taking the first step.
Horses have been used as beasts of burden in Mumbai for so many years that sometimes people don't even see them anymore, even as they struggle on the streets in plain view. PETA has worked to open the public's eyes to the suffering of horses used to pull Victorias. These horses are forced to pull heavy loads all day long in sweltering heat and monsoon rains, and drivers often use spike bits that cut and tear their mouths. When horses are too worn out or ill to continue, they often collapse. They never get enough food or water, and at the end of an exhausting day, there's no relief. PETA investigators documented filthy and dilapidated stables and injured, sick, and severely malnourished horses forced to stand amid their own urine and feces on trash-strewn floors. These horses were tightly bound by their legs and heads, allowing them little to no movement. Feed troughs and mangers were filthy, and food was non-existent, rotten, or contaminated. Some horses were so malnourished that their bones were protruding. Others were found with untreated injuries. Horses were commonly found with painfully swollen joints from being made to work on concrete. These stables are unlicensed and so atrocious that they also put public health at risk. We have called for a complete ban on Victorias in the city, and we intend to achieve it. Last year, Ingrid took the campaign to the streets when she hitched herself to a Victoria and pulled it while holding a sign reading, "Horses work to death, ban Victorias." Whether it's through pulling carriages, filing lawsuits, or rescuing animals, we will persist in establishing fundamental rights for all animals, and one day soon we'll declare victory for the horses suffering on Mumbai streets. Seeing Ingrid straining under the weight of the heavy Victoria tackle, I was reminded of the words we've all heard her say many times, that when it comes to feelings like fear, hunger, pain, love, and joy, a rat
is a pig,
is a dog,
Is a boy.